This reading is for a collective of people that are tapping into emotions that they never allowed themselves to feel before, and that is creating a very powerful opportunity, okay? So I feel like recently in the collective, we just had Mercury retrograde, and I think because of that, we've had a lot of wounds come up from the past regarding communication. And I think this can be on a grand scale in the sense of like the way that society communicates like with us, you know what I mean? Like in terms of like, oh, like sexism and like racism and stuff, you know, like that's communication, right? On a very like grand scale. And then also like communication within our personal lives. And I don't know about you, but I have been feeling so much rage. And it's interesting for me because rage is one thing that I was not allowed to feel as a kid. Well, actually, I wasn't allowed to feel, oh, there's a woodpecker in my tree. Okay, yeah, that's relevant because I'm getting like the image of like, you know how woodpeckers, like they dig holes within the tree to get the bugs out? And this is kind of that energy here. It's like we're digging holes into our psyche and pulling out like those juicy kind of bits here, but that's kind of gross, but you know. And anyways, back to what I was saying is one thing that I was really not allowed to feel in childhood was anger, amongst many other things. But one thing that could never be justified by the people around me was anger. You know, sadness could always be allowed. Oh, you scraped your knee, okay. I guess I'll, you know, allow you to cry, right? But anger was one thing that was like unjustifiable in any circumstance. I was not allowed to be angry ever, and that had been coming up so much during that Mercury retrograde. I have been so angry the last couple of days, and it's interesting because it's like usually you would think of that as a bad thing, you know, feeling anger, right? Or at least I would, you know, I would. But I realized that it's actually really powerful because it's pushing me. It's action, right? I'm an Aries moon, you know, like that's fire. It's fire energy. Anger is fire energy. Anger is what pushes us to transmute. You know, if we weren't unhappy with our circumstances and if we didn't believe that we deserved better, we wouldn't go anywhere. And that's what anger is. Anger is the part of ourselves that knows that we deserve better and that knows that we can get better. We can get better than this. And it says, why are we settling for this? This makes me mad. The way that I'm being treated makes me mad. And for me to be able to tap back into that recently has been so powerful for me. And like, it's just, I don't know, it's just really, I think, prevalent. Like there's so many like bad emotions coming up, but they're coming forth in this collective from a place of power instead of from a place of actual rage. You know, like actual rage can be a problem. I said that weird. Actual rage can be a problem, you know, when we're overly angry, right? And then there's underly angry, and then there's a healthy balance, right? And so with the Queen of Cups here, the Queen of Cups to me is pure balance emotionally. Cups is the emotional suit, it's water. And when the Queen is there, she's balanced because feminine energy is at home in water. And I think the Queen of Cups here is coming forth as like a reminder that emotions are never to be demonized, you know, even though people do that. And I think, you know, there might be a certain power in there of like saying, you know, like, you want me to be the bad guy, I'll be the bad guy, you know, right? And some of you might be stepping into that energy here, but that's still Queen of Cups energy, because Queen of Cups energy is accepting all facets of your emotional self and allowing yourself to feel the full breadth of your emotions and like just be, you know, feminine energy is so just being, you know. And then I think in comparison to the King of Cups, it's so much more like receptive to emotions, you know. It's kind of like, yeah, those are my emotions, they're emotions. Whereas the King of Cups is kind of like, those are my emotions, I know when I need to reel them in and when I need to let them flow. And the Queen of Cups is kind of more like, I'm just gonna see where they bring me, right? And both things can be positive, you know, like we need to balance those mindsets fully. Like sometimes you need to be King of Cups energy, sometimes you need to be Queen of Cups energy. And I think though this collective right now is stepping into Queen of Cups energy. You're stepping into the idea of, let me see where these emotions can take me. Let me see where these emotions want me to go, okay? And again, like I'm feeling like I'm reading for a collective that had emotions weaponized in childhood. They had emotions weaponized against them. And so that is like the energy of like, again, like a parent, like you're not allowed to talk back to me. A parent, like you're not allowed to feel sad, right? And when we don't receive comfort in childhood around our sad emotions, or like, or like, you know, allow ourselves to express anger, that becomes repressed, right? And repressed emotions can lead to so many different things, you know, like in our body, like actual like chronic illness and stuff. And as I'm reading for this collective, I'm literally struggling to get my words out. Like I said, I've had to film this reading so many times just because I feel like things keep happening that keep blocking my communication. And I think that's what this collective is going through right now. And I feel for you, because this energy sucks so bad. Like just having to deal with it for like 5 seconds, well, more like 20 minutes. It's actually been 45 minutes of me trying to sit down and film this video because I keep facing blockages. I think for this collective, you never stepped out of that blockage phase, and you almost kind of block yourself now. I don't think like thought-wise. I think you're somebody who has a very like deep internal world, but you've stopped sharing that outwardly because you realize that people are assholes. And you're like, I don't want to share that. But I think the important thing here is finding like a niche, you know, within society that does appreciate your inner world, right? And whatever that means to you, you know, I think that's just a concept that this collective could chew on here a little bit. Because we have the Wheel of Fortune here, and the Wheel of Fortune is a green cloaked figure surrounded by a bunch of like other, oh my god, surrounded by like a bunch of other, you know, personalities, and the figure is cloaked in green, which is the heart chakra, and they're protecting their heart chakra. They're encasing themselves in their heart chakra, and they're surrounded by blue, which is throat chakra. So it's kind of saying, it's like, I'm going to be myself from my heart space. I don't care what's going on around me. I don't care what opinions are going to be expressed about me. I'm just going to do me, right? And like really encasing yourself. Like, I think this Mercury retrograde almost cocooned you into a place of the heart space, if that makes sense. Like the energy that I'm getting here is, it's like you're so tapped into your emotions, right? And the reason that this comes up during Mercury retrograde is because Mercury rules our relationships and our connections, right? I can't remember if I said that already in this video or one of the many other videos already trying to film today. When Mercury retrogrades, it brings back any unhealed lessons in that department. And that's why old relationships tend to come back, because it's sort of like a test, you know? But sometimes genuinely, like, old relationships want to come back, and like that's a positive thing, right? But I feel like for this collective, it's like you've had lessons come back regarding communication, whether that be with the whole of society. And by that I mean like being a marginalized community, you know, being LGBT, being a woman, you know, being trans, or being, you know, whatever, you know, like any kind of like, you know, not being white, right? Because that creates a more broader wound within the Mercury, right? Of being isolated from the collective systemic communication, right? And that's something that's been coming up in my own personal life. You know, I'm autistic. I don't know if anybody knew that, but I do have autism, and that created like a major wound for me. And I've been experiencing so much rage regarding that recently, like residual wounds that were coming up during Mercury, and now I'm processing them so that I can move forward, right? And the reason that I talk about that is because I think this collective is going through a very similar thing, right? And those were systemic wounds. And then again, in interpersonal lives, not only was I going through that systemically, I also had a emotionally unavailable family dynamic, right? So like that has nothing to do with society and the world. That's a personal dynamic, right? But both of those were coming up for me during this last Mercury retrograde, and I know why they were coming up, because they're very important for me to move forward, right? Like I had to feel the anger in order to allow myself change, right? And so that's why I'm really working on processing that stuff right now. And all of this to say, I'm sharing this with you because I feel like this collective is going through a similar thing. And sometimes the only way that I can explain the energies going on in the world around me is through my own experience, right? Following up here, we talked about the Wheel of Fortune, we talked about the Queen of Cups, and we have the Star card here, which I have to cover up, followed by the Ace of Wands. And I think the interesting part about this is both of these cards have very prevalent purple energy and yellow energy. Connection to the divine, right? And yellow is solar plexus, right? It's joy. And so it's like, I feel like you're really going to be expressing from an authentic place here, but there is obviously more to say. The Star card follows the Tower card, okay? So after a foundation is torn down with the Tower card, which the Tower isn't here, it isn't present, but it's important that we follow that story to understand why the Star card is so important. The Star card is letting that foundation be torn down so that you may move on to somewhere better. The Star card I often interpret as the North Star, Polaris, and Polaris in traditional stories is often told as that sort of like guiding star. Follow the North Star and you'll get to where you need to go, right? And so this foundation is torn down with the Tower here so that you may move on to somewhere better, so that you may see your North Star and follow that North Star. You know, maybe the Tower was too tall that you couldn't even see the North Star, you know, behind it, right? And so this Mercury retrograde might have been that Tower moment for you. And I think the reason that something like the Tower hasn't come out here is I think because you went through this before. Again, like I said, Mercury, bringing back lessons from the past. And it was a previous Tower moment that you were revisiting during this Mercury retrograde. And now you're moving on to that star energy. So this was kind of like the final wrap up of like, hey, just a reminder that these wounds have a little bit more that you need to work on before moving on, right? And like, time isn't linear, right? Time is cyclical. So we're always going to have wounds that come up from the past, right? But this is something that needed to be recognized before we move on, right? And it might come back up later, but right now, this is like, it was important, right? For you to be able to move on from. And now the path forward is being revealed, especially with the Ace of Wands here. You're growing something new with the Ace of Wands. The Ace of Wands, I like to read it as, you know, you've planted the seed, or you're germinating an idea. An idea has sprouted within your mind. And I think this is also like prevalent of like self-growth, you know, like you've almost like planted a new seed for the tree of your mind, if that makes sense. You know, like if we imagine our mind is like a big bushy tree, it's like almost like you chopped the old one down and planted a new seed to grow a newer and stronger mindset, followed by the World card here on the bottom. So World card is completion of a cycle. So you're moving forward on a path that's going to bring about a cycle completion here. And I think the important thing about the World is like, we start at the Fool, right? We start at the Fool, which is the beginning, and then the World is the ending, right? So just think of the World as that energy, because there's a lot of cards that are cyclical, right? And represent cycles and completion of cycles, you know, like even the Wheel of Fortune is cyclical, right? But the World is like very final. Okay, it's like, you've won, congratulations, you've won, you know, like game over, you've won, right? Like to me, the World is like the end credits at a movie, you know, where you're like, wow, I feel accomplished, you know, I feel good about that. So yeah, I'm gonna leave that reading there. If you enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe, as well as like the video and leave a comment down below. You know, get your voice out there, let it be heard, because I think that's very important to this collective right now. I'll see you guys in the next video, and goodbye for now.